Women's Day takes place on the 9th of August every year in South Africa. The holiday pays tribute to a historical day in South African history when women of color fought for their freedom. The date continues to signify the strength of these women, but was also dedicated to spreading awareness about the challenges faced by women in contemporary society, including the business community. Joining us now to discuss further is a prominent member of the business community in South Africa, Vumile Msweli, career coach and the CEO of award-winning career coach and CEO of Hesed Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy belated Women's Day in South Africa. What does the, National Women's Day celebration mean to you, as an African woman, Vumile?
Good afternoon, Rojas, and good afternoon to your listeners. I think for me, I'm always in awe of women. And I think being a woman, they say, may we be them, may we raise them, may we inculcate what it means to be a strong African woman. And I think for me, specifically having two celebrations, obviously in March with the rest of the world, and specifically in South Africa in August, where we commemorate what these incredible women did, where they went against racial lines and they demanded equality. That's what I always ask myself, is can I go beyond what the boundaries are and demand equality and take it and really lean in and take up more space.
And what's always discussed, the level of progress in Africa with regards to gender equality, sexism, also not only in the workplace, but also outside the workplace. What's your read on progress made, if any?
I think we're very, very far. If we look at Africa, in West Africa, 44% of women aged between the ages of 20 to 24 were married before they were even 15 years old. 72% of girls aged 15 to 24 are illiterate as opposed to their male counterparts at 79%. The lack of access to education for girls has consequences across our development within business and indeed across our entire countries. And I really, really feel a little bit disappointed. Of course, in 1995, we came together as the United Nations and we said, these are the goals. 30% of women must start taking up space. Yet here we are, decades later, and only 24% of seats in the national parliament across the continent are held by women. We have made some strides, but I think we are very, very far. We're very, very far from where we should be as a continent.
All right, and I guess since you mentioned the United Nations, what is the role of the United Nations in, breaking that gender bias?
I think for me, their role is indeed to really, really push the boundaries and create the opportunities. But the United Nations, of course, is an organization that is outside of us. And I think the real challenge is how do we make the changes internally? It's always, interesting to me that we celebrate Women's Day. And for me, I'd be happy the day we don't have to celebrate Women's Day, where men and women are celebrated every single day because there isn't such a massive gap. And I think what we are failing to focus on outside of just the systems and the policies is how do we make those internal changes? And as I like to say to my clients is, if it was your daughter, how would you treat her? What opportunities would you create for her? And all of a sudden, it's a different conversation. It's no longer a diversity conversation. It's about my daughter deserves the same. But every woman is somebody's daughter. So how do we start shifting our mindset to say, what decisions am I going to make as either a man or a woman in power to create opportunities for more women? Is it a case of creating an opportunity at an executive board meeting and say, mentoring someone to say, come along and see and get exposed to the real discussions happening on ground? Is it a case of saying, from a CSI perspective, let's give more funding to women to build their businesses? So I think for me, it's really the practicalities as opposed to just focusing on large organizations to hopefully solve all our problems.
Thanks. You mentioned the gap. What's the impact of the gender gap on women in business in Africa?
It is very, very big, to be quite honest with you. What we are seeing, of course, is there's a gap from a financial perspective within the payment gap. There is also a gap, from an opportunities gap. A lot of us get very, very excited to say, oh my goodness, Sub-Saharan Africa boasts the highest rate of women entrepreneurs at 27%. And we get very, very excited, not realizing what those numbers actually mean. If we're looking at it, yes, they're 27%, women entrepreneurs, but they are small businesses, with very few of them able to scale and grow. And even those numbers are a little bit skewed. They're predominantly in Botswana, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia. So if you're saying what is actually happening in Tanzania, what's happening in South Africa, in Eswatini, it's a different conversation. And I think if we're also honest, it's because the numbers for the people who can create opportunities is a little bit skewed. 92% of the partners in a top 100 venture capital, as opposed to the women counterparts only get 2% of those potential funds who could scale those businesses.
Thank you for that. So as far as, you've mentioned those numbers. As far as what kind of solutions can women in business prefer for the sustainable development goals that we're looking to achieve in that area?
So, of course, if we start looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to default to the United Nations. And I think for me, there are three that are very, very easy for us to win. Goal number 5 being gender equality. We take a look at goal number 9, the industry, innovation, infrastructure, and of goal number 10, reduce inequality. If we're able to infiltrate women into those positions of power, be comfortable in the coaching and mentoring of women, realizing they wouldn't have had as much exposure from a historical perspective as their male counterparts, we're able to quickly close those gaps. Of course, gender equality gets taken care of because women are getting more opportunities. I think the whole point of innovation is our ability to look at things from a creative perspective, from a different frame of reference, which women will be able to bring to the table. And that will naturally help reduce inequality, at least from the gender perspective. Then we can start tackling it also from a financial perspective.
What are the challenges common to African women in business today? What would you say they are?
As an African woman in business, I think being sexist is one, right? If we walk into a room and people realize that I'm the CEO, they often will then look to my male counterpart and say, "Oh, are you not necessarily running the ship?" There's that. There's the reality of being a childbearing person. Your capacity for time and your approach to your career is a little bit different. You're worried about, I've got to get home by this time because I've got to make sure there's dinner at the table. My husband's taken care of. My children are taken care of. In my childbearing years, I've got to be comfortable taking a step back because I've got to look after my young children as opposed to driving my career. And I think what we've done incorrectly is try and make corporate as it is, business as it is, remain the same, as opposed to saying what sort of hybrid model needs to exist so we can still leverage the quality of contribution women can bring without making them have to choose between their career or having a family.
If we are having this conversation a year from now in 2023, do you think will be any strides made between now and then, or 2024? Well, how encouraged are you about development or improving everything we've discussed within a particular timeline?
Rotus, I'm an eternal optimist and you're making me a pessimist with that question.
I'm sorry.
If things haven't had such great strides since 1995, I doubt to think that there'll be massive strides made within the next 12 months. But however, as I often say, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we underestimate what we can do in a decade. So for me, I'm more interested in having the conversation in a decade's time, in saying as women are taking up more space, what is changing? The world of work now becoming a little bit more flexible. Does this mean we can have more African women contributing in a meaningful way? Does this mean that we can start building businesses that aren't only sustenance hand to mouth, but can scale across the continent? Obviously, with the Economic Free Trade Agreement, that's also a great opportunity for women to take up space. So I'm hopeful in a decade, yes, definitely some strides. Next 12 months, I will say, ask me no questions that will force me to tell some lies.
I like that. We overestimate what we can do in a year. We underestimate what we can do in a decade. I like that a lot. Vumile Msweli, award-winning career coach, CEO, Hesed Consulting, joining us from Johannesburg. Thank you so much for your time, and happy Women's Day in South Africa to you once more. Thank you so much.